Princess Marek let out a tortured scream as the reptilian Zorgon warlord dug his claws into her carapace and hurled her against the unyielding metal bars of the cage. Despite being the daughter of the mighty Ithorian Emperor Zaroth III, here in the bowels of the Zorgon slave pits, she was just another insectoid slave to be tortured at her captor's whims. As her blue blood pooled around her shattered legs, she knew that without a miracle, she would die on this hellish alien world, light years from her home, her empire, and anyone who cared. But miracles are what humans do best. Sean Williams, former Navy SEAL and current mercenary badass, was humanity's answer to the Zorgon scum who had abducted the princess during a diplomatic mission. The Ithorians, locked in a bitter war with the Zorgons, had offered Sean an eye-watering reward of 100 million credits to bring her back safely from the heart of Zorgon territory. It was a near-suicidal job. The insectoid bastards knew it too. They had abandoned the princess, leaving her for dead, rather than risk their own carapaces on a rescue. But for Sean, this was the score of a lifetime. With a dying mother back on Earth and no other way to pay for her treatment, this mission was his only shot. It would take every ounce of his skill and cunning, and probably half his luck. But one way or another he was bringing the princess home. The Ithorians had done their part, providing Sean with a state-of-the-art stealth ship, the ISS Shadow, and a promised crew of their elite commandos. He would need the help infiltrating Zaxis Prime, the Zorgon homeworld. But as Sean strapped himself into the pilot's seat, ready for takeoff, he was shocked to see the bay doors opening and the Ithorian soldiers filing out, abandoning him. Sean slammed his fist on the console in frustration, then sighed and cracked his knuckles. Looks like he would be doing this the hard way, the human way. He had to go it alone, his wits, his guns, and sheer reckless human bravado against the might of the entire Zorgon military. And if he failed, it would mean his death and the end of Princess Marek's life. Sean lifted the Shadow into the air and hit the thrusters. He had a princess to save. Sean guided the ISS Shadow through the turbulent atmosphere of Zaxis Prime, his knuckles tightening on the controls as the ship shuddered and jolted. The advanced stealth technology rendered the vessel nearly invisible to the Zorgon's scanning arrays, but it did nothing to smooth the ride. Sean gritted his teeth as he brought the Shadow down behind a jagged outcropping of rock, just beyond visual range of the towering fortress where Princess Marek was imprisoned. Sean hit the release on his harness and stood, his legs unsteady after the rough landing. He made his way back to the armory, strapping on his matte black stealth suit, checking the charge on his pulse rifle, and slipping an array of gadgets into the suit's many pockets. The holographic disguise emitter, the compact EMP device, he'd need every edge he could get in there. The outer perimeter was heavily guarded, with patrols of heavily armed Zorgon soldiers marching between the sentry towers, their reptilian eyes scanning for any signs of intrusion. But Sean's suit rendered him all but invisible as he crept past their lines, his footfalls silent on the rocky ground. The fortress itself was a different story. Blast doors 3 meters thick, biosignature scanners, DNA-encoded locks. The Zorgons hadn't taken any chances with their prize prisoner's security, but they hadn't counted on Sean Williams. The EMP device fried the circuit on the main door, and a combination of the holographic disguise emitter and sheer balls got him past the guards in the control room. Sean followed the schematics the Ithorians had provided, winding his way down into the bowels of the fortress, into the dank, dreary cell block where the Zorgons kept their guests. His heart hammered in his chest as he approached the cell at the end of the block. This was it. The princess, the payday, his mother's only hope. The meme. But as the cell door swung open, and Sean's eyes fell on the broken, bleeding form of Princess Marek, his heart sank. She was in bad shape, her carapace cracked, her wings shredded, barely clinging to life. And there, at the base of her delicate insectoid skull, was a crude metallic device digging into her exoskeleton. A neural implant. Sean had seen them before, in the Zorgon labor camps. A tracking device, a fail-safe, and a death sentence all in one. As Sean stepped into the cell, the princess's compound eyes flickered open, wide with terror. She thrashed weakly, trying to pull away, but Sean held up his hands in a placating gesture. Easy, easy, I'm here to help. I'm going to get you out of here, he said softly. But as he reached for the neural implant, Princess Marek let out a screech of pure, primal fear. No, don't touch it, it's booby-trapped. If you try to remove it, it'll kill me. Neurotoxin straight to my brain. Jean pulled his hand back as if burned. Shit, this complicated things. He couldn't exactly sneak her out of here with that thing still attached, broadcasting their every move to the Zorgon guards. But if he couldn't remove it... Just then, there was a sound at the cell door. Sean spun, pulse rifle at the ready, but the figure that stepped into the room wasn't a guard. It was a Zorgon, but a scrawny one, wearing the grease-stained coveralls of a technician. The creature held up its clawed hands in a gesture of surrender. "Don't shoot, I'm a friend. My name is Grezax. I'm here to help," the Zorgon said, its voice a sibilant hiss. Sean kept his rifle trained on the creature's chest. "Help? Why the hell would you want to help us, sir?" Grezax stepped closer, keeping his hands raised. "Not all of us support this war. Some of us think there could be peace between our peoples, if only we could get our leaders to listen. Returning the princess to her people could be the first step." Sean narrowed his eyes, trying to read the alien's inscrutable expression. Could this be a trap? But what choice did he have? "Okay, say I believe you. That implant in her head, it's going to make moving her a real problem. You know anything about them?" Sean asked. Grezax nodded eagerly. "I've worked on them before. The neurotoxin trigger is linked to the fortress's main computer system. If we could hack in, I might be able to disable it remotely. But to access that system, we'll need a command center access code." Sean lowered his rifle slightly, his mind racing. The command center would be heavily guarded, and they were running out of time. The Zorgon technician said the princess was due to be executed in 3 days, a public display to demoralize the Ithorians. It was a risky plan, but it was the only one they had. "All right, Grezax, you've got yourself a deal. Let's go steal that access code." Sean and Grezax made their way through the twisting corridors of the Zorgon fortress, their disguises holding up under the scrutiny of the occasional passing guard. The holographic emitters transformed their appearance, making Sean appear as a burly Zorgon commander and Grezax as his subordinate. They reached the command center without incident, the door sliding open as they approached. Inside, a handful of Zorgon technicians manned the various consoles, their clawed fingers dancing over the controls. Grezax moved to an unoccupied terminal, his disguised form blending in perfectly. Sean stood watch, his hand resting on the grip of his concealed plasma rifle. "I'm in," Grezax hissed under his breath, his eyes scanning the lines of code scrolling across the screen. Accessing the security protocols now. But as Grezax worked, a large Zorgon with the insignia of a commander on his uniform approached. His eyes narrowed in suspicion. "You there," he barked at Sean. "I don't recognize you. What's your designation?" Sean straightened, meeting the commander's gaze. "Commander Kravox," he said, the name popping up on his disguise emitter's display. "I've been transferred from the southern sector." But Kravox wasn't buying it. His hand dropped to his sidearm. "There are no transfers scheduled for today. You're coming with me to—" Sean didn't let him finish. In a blur of motion, he drew his plasma rifle and fired, the bolt catching Kravox in the chest and sending him flying back. The command center erupted into chaos, Zorgon soldiers drawing their weapons and opening fire. Sean dove for cover, plasma bolts sizzling past him. He popped up, his rifle spitting deadly energy, dropping Zorgons left and right. But there were too many, and he couldn't keep this up forever. "Grezax," he yelled over the din of battle, "tell me you have that code." "Almost," Grezax shouted back, his claws flying over the keys. "Just a little more time." Sean gritted his teeth and kept firing, but a searing pain ripped through his shoulder as a plasma bolt found its mark. He stumbled, his rifle clattering to the floor. Kravox, bleeding but alive, bore down on him, murder in his eyes. Sean drew his monomolecular blade, the razor-sharp edge gleaming. He met Kravox's charge, parrying the Zorgon's claws with the blade. They fought in a whirlwind of slashing claws and flashing steel, Sean's wound screaming with every movement. With a final desperate lunge, Sean buried the blade in Kravox's throat. The Zorgon commander gurgled, green blood spurting, and fell. Sean snatched up a fallen plasma grenade and hurled it into the thickest knot of Zorgon soldiers. The explosion ripped through their ranks, buying precious seconds. "Got it?" Grezax crowed triumphantly, but as they turned to make their escape, a hulking form blocked the doorway. A Zorgon war drone, all gleaming metal and whirring servos, its multiple weapon arms trained on them. Sean charged, ignoring the burning pain in his shoulder. He ducked under a swipe of the drone's hydraulic claws, his blade severing the lines. The claw hung useless, leaking fluid. The drone's other arm swung around, plasma cannons humming as they powered up. Sean leapt, his blade a silver blur, slicing through the delicate control circuitry at the drone's neck joint. The cannons fell silent. Sparks flew as Sean pried open the drone's control panel, his fingers working feverishly. With a final twist of a wire, the drone shuddered, then straightened. Its remaining weapons swung around to point back down the corridor at the advancing Zorgons. "Move!" Sean yelled, pushing Grezax ahead of him. They ran, the reprogrammed drone lumbering behind them, plasma bolts and laser beams filling the corridor as it clashed with the Zorgon soldiers. They reached Princess Marik's cell, the access code opening the door. Sean rushed to the princess's side, Grezax right behind him. The Zorgon technician tapped at a handheld device, interfacing with the fortress's computer. "Accessing the implant's control system, and it's disabled," Grezax reported, a note of triumph in his voice. Sean helped the princess to her feet, supporting her weight. "Can you walk?" he asked urgently. Princess Marik nodded, her compound eyes glinting with determination despite her injuries. "I can make it, let's go." They hurried through the fortress corridors, the sounds of battle echoing behind them as the war drone held off their pursuers. But as they reached the landing platform, where Sean had left the ISS Shadow, their hearts sank. The platform was crawling with Zorgon soldiers, and beyond, the sky was filled with the angular shapes of Zorgon fighter craft. A voice boomed from loudspeakers all around the fortress. "Attention all units. By order of the Zorgon High Command, Zaxis Prime is now under lockdown. No ships are to enter or leave the planet until the Athorian princess is recaptured. Lethal force is authorized." Sean, Grezax, and Princess Marik ducked back into the shadows of the fortress entrance, the gravity of their situation sinking in. They were trapped on a hostile world, with every Zorgon soldier on the planet hunting for them, and no way off. Sean gripped his rifle, his mind racing. They needed a new plan, and fast, or this rescue mission would become a suicide run. Sean's mind raced as he assessed their dire situation, trapped on Zaxis Prime, surrounded by hostile Zorgon forces, with no way off the planet. But Sean Williams was no stranger to impossible odds. He activated his wrist communicator and punched in a coded frequency. "Ripper, you there? It's Sean. I need a favor, and I need it now." The reply crackled through the communicator's speaker. "Sean? Shit, I thought you were dead. What the hell are you doing on Zaxis Prime?" "Long story. I've got the princess, but we're in a tight spot. The Zorgons have the planet locked down tighter than a nun's." Sean caught himself, glancing at Marik. Tighter than a drum. We need an extraction, and we need it yesterday." There was a pause on the other end. "All right. I've got the MSS Hellfire in orbit. Give me your coordinates and I'll come in guns blazing. We'll punch a hole in their blockade and pull you out." Sean grinned. Good old Jack, always ready for a fight. "Sending coordinates now, and Jack, thanks, I owe you one." "Damn right you do. Ripper out." Sean turned to Grezax and Marik. "All right, we've got our ride out of here, but we need to get to these coordinates. Grezax, you said something about a stealth fighter." The Zorgon rebel nodded. "Yes, a prototype. It's hidden in a secret underground hangar not far from here, but we must hurry." They moved through the fortress's winding corridors, avoiding patrols and security systems with Grezax's insider knowledge. Finally, they reached a nondescript wall deep in the lower levels. Grezax tapped a series of hidden switches, and the wall slid open, revealing a dimly lit hangar. There, sleek and deadly, crouched the Zorgon stealth fighter. Its black hull seemed to absorb the light, its angles harsh and predatory. Sean whistled appreciatively. But as they approached the fighter, a lithe figure dropped from the shadows above, landing in a crouch before them. It was a female Zorgon, clad in form-fitting black armor, a pair of wickedly curved blades in her hands. "Going somewhere?" she hissed, her eyes glinting with malice. Grezax gasped. "The Widow, the High Command's top assassin." The Widow lunged, her blades flashing. Sean met her charge, his monomolecular blade sparking as it clashed with her poisoned steel. They fought in a blur of slashing blades and spinning kicks, evenly matched. Grezax and Marek found themselves beset by the Widow's fellow assassins, appearing from the shadows like wraiths. Grezax snatched up a plasma rifle from a fallen guard and laid down covering fire, the blue bolts searing through the air. Marek, her injuries forgotten in the heat of battle, lashed out with her insectoid legs, sending assassins flying. Sean and the Widow circled each other, blades at the ready. She feinted left, then spun right, her blade scoring a line of fire across Sean's ribs. He gritted his teeth against the pain, feeling the poison start to burn in his veins. He knew he had only one chance. As the Widow lunged in for the kill, Sean sidestepped, seizing her wrist and twisting. There was a sickening snap as her neck broke, and she crumpled to the hangar floor. Sean staggered, the room spinning around him. Grezax and Marek were at his side in an instant, dragging him towards the stealth fighter as the hangar erupted in explosions, the assassins' self-destruct devices triggered by their leader's death. They barely made it into the fighter before the blasts consumed the hangar, the shockwaves rattling their teeth as Grezax punched the engines and sent them rocketing into the sky. But their troubles weren't over. As they breached the atmosphere, the massive hulk of a Zorgon battlecruiser loomed before them, its weapon batteries swiveling to lock on. Grezax cursed, throwing the fighter into evasive maneuvers as the cruiser's plasma cannons lit up the void. But the stealth fighter, for all its advanced technology, was no match for the cruiser's firepower. Just as the cruiser's cannons were about to reduce them to atoms, a series of massive explosions rocked its hull. The MSS Hellfire, Jack's frigate, had arrived, its guns blazing as it tore into the Zorgon fleet. The Hellfire's batteries pounded the battlecruiser, breaching its shields and shredding its hull. Explosions blossomed along its length as Jack's expert gunnery found weak points and critical systems. Under the cover of the Hellfire's assault, Grezax guided the limping stealth fighter towards the frigate's hangar bay. They set down hard, the fighter skidding across the deck in a shower of sparks. The hangar doors slammed shut, and the Hellfire's engines roared as Jack pulled them away from Zaxis Prime, the remnants of the Zorgon blockade scattering before their guns. In the fighter's cockpit, Princess Marek cradled Sean's head in her lap, her compound eyes wide with fear as she saw the sickly green tendrils of the Widow's poison spreading beneath his skin. He was fading fast, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Hold on, Sean," Marek pleaded, her voice breaking. "Just hold on, we'll get you help, I promise, just stay with me." But even as the Hellfire carried them to safety, Sean could feel the poison dragging him down into darkness. His last thought before unconsciousness claimed him was that at least this time his death would have meant something. He had saved the princess, struck a blow against the Zorgons. Maybe, just maybe, he had made a difference. And with that final fleeting hope, Sean Williams slipped into the waiting shadows. As the MSS Hellfire carried them away from Zaxis Prime, Marek cradled Sean's head in her lap, her compound eyes wide with fear as the Widow's poison spread beneath his skin. Sean's breaths came shallow and labored, his pulse growing weaker by the second. "Set course for Ithorian space, maximum speed," Marek commanded Grezax, her voice shaking but resolute. "He needs advanced medical care now." Grezax hesitated, his clawed hands hovering over the controls. "Princess, if I return to Ithorian territory, I'll be executed as a traitor. I helped you escape. I turned against my own people." Marek's gaze snapped to the Zorgon rebel, her eyes hard. "You helped save my life, Grezax. I won't let them harm you. You have my word." Grezax met her gaze for a long moment, then nodded, his fingers flying over the console as he plotted their jump. The stars outside the viewport stretched into glowing lines as the Hellfire leaped into hyperspace. In the medical bay, Marek held Sean's hand, her own trembling. "Stay with me, Sean," she pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. "Just hold on, we're getting you help." Sean's eyelids fluttered, his unfocused gaze finding her face. "Marek," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "If I don't make it—" "No," Marek cut him off, squeezing his hand tighter. "You're going to make it. You have to. That's an order, soldier." The ghost of a smile touched Sean's lips at her words, but it was quickly replaced by a grimace of pain as another wave of poison racked his body. The jump to Ithorian space seemed to take an eternity, each second stretching into an age as Sean grew weaker, his breaths more shallow. Marek never left his side, her hand clasped in his, as if she could anchor him to life by sheer force of will. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace above the Ithorian homeworld, a fleet of sleek insectoid ships rose to greet them, their hulls gleaming in the light of the system's twin suns. "Ithorian vessel, identify yourself," a voice crackled over the comm, tense and wary. "This is Princess Marek, daughter of Emperor Zaroth III, Marek responded, her voice ringing with authority despite her fear. "I have returned, and I have the human mercenary Sean Williams with me. He is gravely injured and requires immediate medical attention." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end, then a flurry of activity. "Understood, Princess. You are clear to land. Medical teams will be standing by." As the Hellfire descended through the atmosphere, the spires and domes of the Ithorian capital rising to meet them, Marek felt a surge of hope. They had the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy. If anyone could save Sean, it was her people. The ship had barely touched down before a swarm of Ithorian medics surrounded it, anti-grav stretchers at the ready. They carefully loaded Sean's unconscious form, rushing him into the waiting medical facility, a shimmering dome of glass and steel. Marek followed close behind, her heart in her throat as she watched the medics work, their movements precise and urgent. They attached devices to Sean's skin, injected him with glowing liquids, all while shouting medical jargon that she could barely understand. Hours passed as Marek paced the waiting area, her insectoid legs wearing a groove in the polished floor. Grezax sat nearby, his head bowed, lost in his own thoughts. Finally, a team of doctors emerged, their expressions unreadable. Marek rushed to them, her heart's pounding. "How is he? Will he survive?" she demanded, her voice raw with emotion. The lead doctor, an elder Ithorian with a scarred carapace, met her gaze solemnly. "We have stabilized his condition, Your Highness. The poison has been neutralized, but the damage to his body is severe. He will require extensive rehabilitation, and even then he may never fully recover." Marek felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath her. Sean, her brave, indomitable human, reduced to this. It was almost too much to bear. But she was a princess, and more than that, she was a warrior. She would not let despair claim her. She squared her shoulders, meeting the doctor's gaze. "He will have the best care, the best treatment, no matter the cost," she declared, her voice unwavering. "I will remain by his side for as long as it takes." And so, as the war between the Ithorians and the Zorgons raged on, Marek took up her vigil at Sean's bedside. She held his hand through the long, painful hours of physical therapy, encouraging him, pushing him, willing him to fight. Grezax, granted asylum for his role in Marek's rescue, lent his knowledge to the Ithorian war effort, working to undermine Zorgon strategies and predict their next moves. Months passed, and slowly, incrementally, Sean began to improve. He took his first halting steps, his legs shaking with effort. He gripped a blaster in hands that once danced across a ship's controls, relearning the skills that had once been second nature. But even as Sean grew stronger, the tide of the war began to turn against the Ithorians. The Zorgons, seemingly endless in their numbers and their ruthlessness, pushed ever closer to the heart of Ithorian space. News reached the capital of a massive Zorgon offensive, a fleet so vast it blotted out the stars. The Ithorians were hopelessly outmatched, their defences crumbling under the onslaught. Marek, now the acting ruler following her father's death in battle, faced an impossible choice. Her people needed her leadership and her strength. But how could she leave Sean, still so fragile, still healing? As she prepared to depart, to lead her soldiers in what might well be their final stand, Sean struggled to his feet, his face set with determination. "I'm going with you," he declared, his voice rough but unwavering. "You need me out there, my skills, my experience, and it could make the difference." Marek wanted to protest, to order him to stay, to heal. But looking into his eyes, she saw the same fire, the same unbreakable spirit that had drawn her to him from the start. "Okay," she said softly, reaching out to touch his cheek. "We do this together, till the end." Side by side they boarded the Ithorian flagship, a gleaming behemoth bristling with weapons. They knew this mission was likely suicide, an infiltration of the Zorgon command ship, an assassination of their leadership. But if it could end the war, if it could save countless lives, it would be worth the cost. As they made their approach, the Zorgon ship looming before them like a monstrous predator, Sean reached out and took Marek's hand, his grip strong and sure. "I love you," he said simply, his eyes locked on hers. "No matter what happens, I need you to know that." Marek felt her heart swell even as tears stung her eyes. "I love you too, Sean Williams," she whispered. "My brave, foolish human." And then they were through the airlock, weapons blazing, carving a path of destruction through the Zorgon ship. They fought like demons, like avenging angels, Marek's claws and Sean's blades, leaving a trail of broken bodies in their wake. But even they could not stand against the might of the entire Zorgon military. They were surrounded, outnumbered, outgunned. And in that final, desperate moment, Sean threw himself in front of Marek, shielding her with his own body as a hail of plasma fire tore through him. He fell into her arms, his blood mingling with her tears as she cradled him, the battle raging around them forgotten. "Marek," he gasped, his hand reaching up to touch her face one last time. But whatever he had been about to say was lost as his eyes glazed over, his final breath rattling from his lungs. Marek howled in agony, a sound of pure primal grief. But even in her despair, she knew what she had to do. With a final, gentle touch, she closed Sean's eyes, then rose to her feet, her own injuries forgotten. She fought with the fury of a mother defending her young, of a mate avenging her fallen love. And against all odds, against all reason, she prevailed. The Zorgon command fell before her, their ship exploding into 1 billion glittering fragments. But the cost had been too high. As she stood on the balcony of her palace, the mantle of Empress heavy on her shoulders, Marek gazed up at the stars, tears tracing silent tracks down her face. Somewhere out there among those infinite lights was the spirit of Sean Williams, the human who had taught her the true meaning of love, of sacrifice, the human who had saved her people even as he had stolen her heart. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered to the heavens, her voice breaking, "until we meet again among the stars." You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.